It's your pal Mike Squires, and this is the Couchers Podcast, episode number 249. My guest this episode is Keith Carne, another wildly talented drummer. I'm pretty lucky to be able to get in touch with these drummers and talk to all these folks. Super Drummer Awareness Month this year has been super fun, once again. Maybe I should just turn into a drum podcast. Maybe I'll learn something about rhythm. That'd be nice for a change. Keith, super cool guy. Met him. We were both at the Sunny Day Real Estate Show, being wowed by William. And, you know, after the show, William says to me, you check this dude out, because this dude is the shit. If that goes to tell you how good Keith is. Also, deep knowledge of New York pizza spots he bestowed upon us that night. We reminisce a little bit about that night, and I get into his history, how he came up playing music, starting at a very young age, and I had a great time hanging out with Keith. What a cool guy. Keith plays drums for We Are Scientists, who will, at the time of the release of this podcast episode, they will be on tour in Europe, and they will be out through mid-April, April 13th or 14th, something like that. Then back for some festivals in the summertime. Check them out and go, get him. I think you could, like any of the people, most all of the people who appear in the podcast, the drummers this month included, are working musicians. If you are working on a recording, an album, whatever, a song, anything, and you want some of the best players around to perform on a recording for you, if you can't reach them directly, get a hold of me. I'll try to put you in touch, or I'll try to see if they're interested. But most people here are interested in working. Working implies that you'd pay them probably. So, there's that little tidbit. But I digress. Support musicians, support drummers. It's Drummer Awareness Month. Thank you, Keith, for joining me. You're great. Speaking of great, you know what's great? The Patreon support that I receive. It's what makes this happen. Right now, the Patreon support Couch Riffs receives breaks us even. That's where we're at. For the first 3 years, a lot of what was happening was I'm going out of pocket, So, I super duper very much appreciate all of the Patreon support that comes in. Thank you. Patreon.com/couchriffs. You can get all of the cover songs there. It's the only place where you can download the audio for the cover songs. I think I'm going to set a threshold, like once people, support at a certain amount over the course of whatever, I'm going to send you a t-shirt. And, when I started the Patreon thing, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and certain people gave me some advice, and I didn't listen to any of that. But I also don't know what would be interesting to you as something that was unlocked behind a firewall. Like, what would you like to see from my Patreon? Please tell me. Let me know. DM me or comment or something. So thank you for the Patreon support. I would love to thank a couple of people. Variety Coffee Roasters, Variety Coffee, which I'm drinking right now out of this jar. It's my preferred vessel, usually. Variety Coffee Roasters is a fine coffee roaster in Brooklyn, New York. They have a number of cafes in Brooklyn and in Manhattan. If you don't live anywhere near New York or those two boroughs, order it online. And if you like it, click the subscribe button. They have coffee subscription. That's right. You click a couple buttons and they just send you coffee as often as you want it, as much as you want. You never have to run out of coffee. You know what's the worst? Running out of coffee. It's the worst. Variety Coffee Roasters, you're a killer. I drink you every single morning. I can't give a better endorsement to anything. So, good to the last drop. Thank you, Variety Coffee Roasters. Thank you, Shane Middleton and Middleton Hair Company. Of course, I'm wearing a hat right now. If you're looking at me, you know that. But if you're listening, I'm wearing a hat. Spoiler alert, I'm wearing a hat. On the occasion that I have a shower, I use Middleton hair products from the second I get into the shower till my hair is dry, and I'm putting product in my hair. I'm using their shampoo. I'm using their conditioner. I'm using the motion lotion, which is like a thing that'll give your hair a little weight. And then I'm using their holding paste. It's killer. And it smells very good, but doesn't smell like I'm using my wife's hair care products. That is one thing that I can very, very, very much appreciate. Look at me. I don't look like I should smell pretty, and I don't. Okay? I don't smell bad. Don't let me send you the wrong message. Middleton Hair Company. You can find their products at thecutby.com. Go check it out. I'm telling you, it's killer. Thank you for your support. This has been a long one. We're going to get into the episode now. Thank you for hanging in there. Don't forget the golden rule. Treat people the way you want to be treated yourself. It's not that fucking hard. It's the easiest shit in the world. Just don't be an asshole. Yeah. Keith.
Mike.
How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for asking.
That's nice to see your face. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really humbled and flattered that you've asked me on the podcast. I'm a fan of the podcast, and it's really great to talk to you.
We met. Thank you. That's very nice. You're a kind man. We met after show. Did we not meet until after the show at the Sunny Day Real Estate?
It was immediately after. Yeah. But William Goldsmith did give me a heads up about there being some fantastic human beings that he recommended I get acquainted with, and then he specifically name dropped you.
What a guy!
I know.
Well, I mean, he sings your praises as well. Let's not get excited about what he said about me, because he was going, and he's a monster, right?
I mean, sorry, it glitched out for a second. You're saying he said that about me, that I'm a monster?
He said, well, he did say you were a monster drummer, and you are, and he's a monster. Like, what a ferocious beast.
He's a great unifying beast, is how I like to think of, about William. He's great, man.
I really wanted to be in that band. I auditioned. I went and played with them.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about that. How was the audition? Like, really hard?
I mean, I felt like I was very well prepared, but I flew across the country, borrowed gear, drove to his house, played 16 songs, and then flew home on the red eye.
Oh my God.
So, it was challenging for sure. The music isn't, it's not AC/DC.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure.
And, but it's music, it's music that I love. I really, anyway, really wanted that gig. Still available, guys. Congratulations, Chris.
Chris sounds great. And if it's any consolation to you, Mike, I also really want to be in that band. But something tells me that the drum chair just isn't open for a little while.
No, Chris does sound amazing. And he's, I was poised to despise him. And then I met him and I was like, God, he's such a nice guy.
He wins you over really quickly. Actually, he and I and his wife have plans to meet up when I'm next going to be in Seattle.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that night after that Sunny Day Real Estate show, it was just such a wonderful, posy, hang. It felt like the good old days, or something like that. But a lot of the folks that I met there were people that I was literally meeting for the first time, and it was just such a great hang. So
it was a lot. It was I'm typically not up that late. I don't think I got home till after 3:30 maybe, and I think we went to Joe's and got some slices.
Mm-hmm.
How long have you been in New York? I'm going to jump in the timeline real quick because there's a second part to this question.
Yeah. I've been here for 13 years.
You have a deep knowledge of Manhattan and Brooklyn pizza.
Hey, I think any self-respecting New Yorker develops that sense, and you got to rep your hometown, especially when you're a touring musician. If you're gonna like hate on like Austin pizza or Portland pizza or something like that, you better back it up with some sort of like creative, alternatives. Let's say.
What do you think about Chicago pizza? Because I think it's fucking bullshit.
I mean, they say deep dish is for tourists. I'm more of a Chicago sausage type cat. I
Yeah.
also really love Mexican food. The tamales available in Chicago are like just absolutely bang doctor. So I tend to not. Also, when I'm on tour in Chicago, I tend to make a habit of not eating until after I play a show because I think that any musician who's ever ate any deep dish pizza before a show will just tell you that they were probably playing the slowest tempos that they've ever played. It just makes you lethargic and sleepy.
I mean, it's like, first of all, for people who are not familiar with what Chicago pizza is all about, it is like you can imagine deep dish, like if you go to fucking Shakey's or whatever, the Domino's version, but this is like, it comes in like a fucking soup bowl. It comes in like
Yeah.
it comes in not even on a sheet pan. It comes in like a cake pan,
Yeah, yeah. It's like pizza casserole.
It's wild. Like you can't eat more than a
Detroit
slice of that.
No, Detroit pizza, I think, is capturing always, like in my mind, like what Chicago is kind of trying to be. Get those nice crispy edges.
I don't know what Detroit pizza is.
It's kind of like in a sheet pan vibe. It's like what you would imagine, sort of like apex, um, like mental image of Chicago pizza being, and that's actually Detroit pizza.
I thought Detroit pizza was on your way out, you get stabbed and the cops don't show up.
Also, your gear gets ripped. Don't
Yeah.
forget that aspect of it.
Oh, have you had your gear stolen on tour before?
Man, I and the bands that I have played in have been so fortunate. I mean, no band is without incident. When we were in Dublin 5 years ago, we had a window smashed out of a van, but no gear was taken. It was just sort of like some like good old Irish jollies or something like that. Somebody threw a rock right through our side window. But they didn't disturb anything in the van. And the only real bad outcome was that we had to drive from Dublin to Sheffield, UK, with no window.
Well, that's a ferry ride too, isn't it?
It's a ferry ride, but we don't have a death wish, and we don't want to, have a watery grave, so we choose to get out of the van, and we didn't have to be,
That's a
like on
good
the
call.
wind-blown English, or I guess it's the Irish Sea on that side. So it was a ferry ride though too. But yeah, we've been just super fortunate. And then of course, the more people that you talk to, and the more tour managers specifically that you talk to, they persuade you that if you are on the West Coast corridor between Seattle and San Francisco, your gear is going to get gripped. We're pretty sensible about the places that we choose to park the van, so we'll maybe stay, out near the airport or something like that. But I guess those spaces aren't even safe anymore.
Yeah.
How about you? Have
We
you ever had
used
gear taken?
to we I've had all of my guitars stolen out of a practice space before and retrieved them all. Thanks to my friend Phil Hurley and Emerald City Guitars in Seattle. They recovered all of our guitars. It's incredible. Um,
Wow.
we used to carry a tire. We had a trailer behind our van, and we had a tire checker. Do you know what this is?
No.
You stop at a truck stop, and in the truck stop, in the sort of like tire care, wheel care section, where
Mm-hmm.
you can get like pressure checkers and that, you can get a tire checker, which is a wooden club. And we
Whoa.
just dangled a club inside of, on a hook, just on the inside of our trailer.
Mm.
And luckily, we never had to we never had to check anyone's tires for wanting to hold
Whoa.
our gear for us.
Oh man.
But that was our insurance policy, and the always load with a buddy. Always at least two people, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. We're pretty smart about places that we choose to leave the van. And, when I was doing DIY tours back in college, we got one of those. We actually were really smart, and we had a cage installed like behind the back passenger seat, and then had one of those uncuttable hockey puck locks that I was really, really heartened to see mentioned in a recent Jack Reacher novel, where Jack Reacher was like looking at a door and he was like, well, there's no way through that door. So it was like, yes, the decisions that we made in DIY touring were, and we thought going as far as getting a kill switch installed into the vehicle, because, that was the only way that all of our gear was going to get gripped, was if, somebody just stole the freaking van. But we never wound up going that far, and luckily we never had to deal with it. So
a friend of mine was on tour in the 90s, 91, 92, something like this. They were parked in Brooklyn, probably. And someone was sleeping in the van. That's that gag. If you've got a bunk over your little vault in the back of the van, there's a bed there. Someone sleeps with the gear, right? Well,
the torpedo lounge, we always used to call it. If you were ever in an accident, you just...
He falls asleep, probably had a couple of sodas in him, and he wakes up and the van is moving, and he's like, what's going on? And he's on the Jersey Turnpike. Someone had stolen the van and was just driving it away, and they just pulled over and bailed, just ran. And he's like, doesn't know where he is, doesn't know where the van was even parked, or have phone numbers or anything. Pre-cell phone.
Oh my God. Yeah, pre-cell phone, yeah.
Can you imagine?
Wow. Man, that's a very the call is coming from inside the house moment, God damn.
Oh, hey, let's talk about you. That's what we're all here for.
Okay.
Oh, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Sayreville, New Jersey, which is, as the crow flies, like 28 miles away from my current residence. It's also Bon Jovi's hometown.
Is that right?
Yeah. John Bon Jovi, JBJ, is from Sayreville, New Jersey. And even though a lot of people will tell you that its existence is a myth, I consider Sayreville smack dab in the middle, or what is Central Jersey. A lot of Jerseyans will tell you that there's only North Jersey and South Jersey, but I think I'm living proof that there is Central Jersey.
I'm pretty sure Craigslist will tell you there's a Central Jersey.
And that is the, defining metric of, that's the benchmark of any
it's
self-respecting
like it's the Wikipedia
life.
Of all geography.
There you go. Yeah, that's a great, I'm going to use that to my advantage now. Thanks, Mike.
Transactional geography. Is that where the John Bon Jovi rests area is?
Oh, you bet your bottom dollar it is.
Is it? Is that right?
Yeah.
I drive by that a lot. What exit were you on? That's the
exit. It's exit 124.
Wow. This is Jersey is. People make fun of Jersey, as I'm sure you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of great. It's not, it's not, certainly not worse than most of the states in our union.
I think it's a great place to live, and and it was a great place to grow up. And considering so much of the country looks so similar, the sort of strip mallification and then now those strip malls are dying out. I mean, it's really hard sometimes to tell the difference between, like Georgia and Kansas, or like Ohio and, I don't know, somewhere
Nevada.
else like Nevada. Yeah, sure. Maybe desert landscapes, but still like the, industries that are there and the way that things look from the highway, it all looks the same. So I think that this funny thing, I mean, Jersey obviously gets a bad rep because people most tend to experience it through the Turnpike corridor going between New York City and Philadelphia. And I'll admit that's not a very aesthetically appealing stretch of the continental United States, but New Jersey offers so much access and so much, like it's just so much access to so many different environments. There's really great hiking in New Jersey. You can be in, especially in central Jersey, you can be in Philadelphia in an hour and 20 minutes. You can be in New York City.
Another great place to get stabbed.
Yep, exactly. And have your gear stolen. You can be in New York City in 45 minutes. And that's one of the things that gave me like really like early exposure to incredible music, like world cinema, like, and I don't think I would have had access to that stuff, growing up in the middle of the country. There's also really great access to like other scenes, like there's like little pockets of scenes. I came up in the New Brunswick, New Jersey basement scene where all these amazing old school bands would play, like Lifetime and Thursday and Bouncing Souls and, even, like Vivian Girls were, like a kind of newer band who was always around New Brunswick. And then there were obviously along with those hundreds of other bands that no one's ever heard of that were completely instrumental to my development as a person and musician. And, hell yeah, I love New Jersey.
Right. Rad. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed my time whenever I'm there. And for the record, that section of the drive as you get closer to Philly is very green and lush and nice.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
you
It
get
does
like
get quite
down
nice.
closer to, yeah.
Yeah. And then also,
Uh,
it's funny too, because the Parkway is one of the nicest stretches of highway that I've ever been on, below exit 129. It's totally lush and green and, well landscaped and a joy to
yeah.
drive on.
Well, I'm taking so many side steps here, but so far you've mentioned international film and Jack Reacher, which I think expresses your wide reach. Um, you know, um, were you a good student?
I was a kind of an annoyingly good student, and school kind of came a little bit more easily to me. So, I mean, I worked hard on some things, but I really enjoyed being a student. I think back and cringe a little bit, like wondering if I put out too much of a teacher's pet energy, but I just really enjoyed learning, and I just like really, and I teach now. I'm sitting here in my drum studio where I give drum lessons. And I think, that's also like a sort of like product of kind of contemporary society that's a little bit different from what it was like in the 90s. Like it's a little bit cool to be really into something. I mean, that's why we use the expression nerding out about things now.
Right.
And, there's an element of like sort of sincerity in contemporary society that is largely a reaction to irony that's been shaped and sort of fed to you through the internet. And so I'm, like I was a really interested student, and that stuff really paid off too, because when I was in high school, I was a sophomore and junior in high school, and I would go play gigs with the band teacher and the choir director and my dad. We would go do gigs in the
wow.
Poconos together, and it was just like really fun. And I'd go down with my dad, and we'd sit at the bar and, on break, and he would sneak me a beer, and, we'd just like play cover tunes, Peter Gabriel stuff, whatever. And, for that one night of work, like I'd make $250, which when you're, 16, 17 years old, that's, in, 2002, that's like a lot of money.
Hell yeah.
And
It's
way
a lot of
better
money
than,
now.
yeah, you dig, for a gig. That's that Pocono money. So, being a good student, gave me a lot of opportunities kind of right from the get-go. And I think if I weren't a good student, I wouldn't be, I think of myself as a good teacher. People tell me that they feel that they enjoy my lessons. So, I think that those things are related.
I hope I don't screw this up, but I started following your dad on Instagram, right? Does he
Oh, man.
does yeah?
Yeah. My dad is a great guitarist. He's also become
But he was playing uke, wasn't he?
he's become quite the ukulelist. Ukulele.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a word, but he loves sitting on the front porch of my parents' place and watching dogs and neighbors go by and just playing ukulele. And yeah, he's a really motivated musician, and has been, he was hugely supportive of me, and seeing him play when I was a kid is really, it was the first formulation of it was the first time I really saw my first exposure to a lot of musicians and live shows.
You grew up in a house where he was playing music. Was he professional, semi-professional, hobbyist?
I'd say semi-professional. He was in the cover band circuit on the Jersey Shore, and he would play a lot when I was when I was born. Before I was born, that was his primary income source, was playing in these cover bands. Then a couple years before I was born, he sort of got seduced by kind of management positions in healthcare, and worked in sales. I think
He was
to
seduced by
musicians.
the thought of a comfortable future.
You dig? Yeah, exactly. Of regular income, and being able to afford things.
What a softie.
You dig? But to his credit, he kept up that relationship with music. And the first live show that I ever played, I was 9, and I sat in with his band and played Summer of '69, sang and played the drums, and I would go see him play all the time, and just go sit in with them, with his band. And the guys who he used to play with were the first people I really ever wanted, to think first people I really tried to make think I was cool. And that's been a theme in my life, and my sort of professional existence, is always kind of trying to be cool enough to hang with the older kids.
I hung my hat up on that one a long time ago. I'm just like, I just can't keep up.
Yeah.
So first gig at 9.
I mean, it was the first time I played in front of people that I didn't know.
How long had you been playing at that point?
I mean, seriously, for 2 years. I was semi-pro by that point.
So were you a good student straight away with drums as well? Were you focused?
I was just obsessed. I was just obsessed with the instrument, and I got my first kit when I was 3, and I had a sort of musical epiphany at just before I turned 7, where I'd gone to the cinema with my dad, and we were leaving, and I don't know what thought, why it popped into my head, but I just said, hey, I think I want to take the drums out that you got for me years ago, that I used to beat on. It was a little rinky dink kind of kid set. And I just sat down, and I was like, hey, Dad, show me a beat. You know how to put 2 and 2 together, any guitarist will, usually hop on the drum kit when the drummer takes a pee break or whatever for a second at rehearsal, and accumulate that over years. But he showed me a beat, and then I just came up with a process right then and there, and I still use that process to this day. And then I was just it's basically all I wanted to do.
being that he had a lot of history in his life playing music and had made the decision to focus on a plan A and make music his sort of side hustle. Did he, obviously he was encouraging to you, he bought you a drum set, which is, I mean, that's a tough gig for a parent to accept a kid to be a drummer. It's a rackety racket, and not many kids are great straight out of the gate, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Was he encouraging you to also have a plan A?
Well, it's hard to remember about that because I just always showed so much motivation and so much, like initiative to make music my main focus in life. I started teaching when I was in high school. I was a junior or a senior or whatever, and younger classmen or middle schoolers would come over my parents' house, and I would teach them drums, and then that's also a way that I supported myself in college. I went to music conservatory in New Brunswick. I went to Rutgers, and I don't know. It just always seemed like a very natural way, and I've been really fortunate because of how my preparation has also been met with luck and opportunity, and
The
I
harder
think
you
that.
work, the luckier you get, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's definitely something to that. But I was always interested in a lot of different things. And for a little while, I thought maybe I wanted to write about film or become a film academic. I got a degree in journalism as well as music. So two really like lucrative professions. Um,
Food stamp
um,
professions.
yeah, exactly. And it's jumping forward a little bit, but I worked in radio for a little while. I worked for a show, the NPR station here at WNYC. I was like first an intern and then became a contributing producer for this show called the Leonard Lopate Show. So I always kind of had my I had always had my hands in different things, and if music wasn't going to work out by a certain time for me, I think that they just kind of trusted that I would be, like forward thinking enough to be able to know to build something else.
So, but there was never, sounds like straight out of the gate, like by 7, it sounds like you kind of knew what you wanted your future to at least resemble.
I'm really, really, really fortunate in having, of course, like parental support, but that I figured out early enough what I wanted to do, because there are so many wonderful and intelligent people that I meet today who don't know where to put their creative energy, and whether it's a hobby, whether it's a profession, and it's one of the things my wife and I talk about a lot is how great she's a painter, and just like how grateful we were to have found a purpose early enough in life to not only do it, but also to get the bad shit, the bad art out of the way before anybody was really like paying attention.
Yeah, I feel like if you don't have a place to put that energy, even if you are not if you do not possess like a honed ability to be creative or artistic or even expressive, like you still have energy that you need to release because we're not out hunting and gathering and, whatever anymore.
Yeah,
Like we've got it real
post-survivalist
easy.
at this point.
We need we need outlets, and if you don't have an outlet, a lot of things can go sideways.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, it's also probably part and parcel to why I was a good student, because I had an outlet when I wanted to go home, and also the fact that my outlet was a very physical,
Yeah.
cathartic means of expression. I don't think that that's an accident.
Tell me if you think this is true. Everyone in the band wants to be the drummer.
The drums have a sort of otherworldly allure that I for sure felt. They just look so freaking cool. Um, you know, at least to me, I don't know though. We Are Scientists is probably the first band that I've ever played in where my two bandmates, Keith Murray and Chris Kane, are not hopping on my kit when I sneak away to like go run to the bathroom or whatever. Um,
Right.
but I do think that there is an attraction to everybody in the band to want to know at least how to put a couple things together on the drums.
I mean, so badly, I wish I was a good drummer, and I'm just not. And a good drummer can step away from the drums and for 5 years and step back on the drums and have it
Hmm.
because it's in them. It's not in me.
Hmm. And you've tried?
Yeah, I've even owned a couple drum sets. I wanted it so badly.
I think you just need to find the right teacher.
I don't have you know what I can't do? I'm not a dancer. Can you
Hmm.
dance?
I think I can dance, but tell me if this is true. Almost everyone thinks that they can dance, you know?
I don't.
Oh, okay.
I don't
Yeah.
think I can. Mr. Big, you shut it. That's none of your business. Um,
He's got something to say about being a dancer, I think.
well, he's got something to say about everyone that walks by. Is what he's
Hmm.
got. Um, yeah, I don't have a left foot. I don't have, I got no left foot. And you need one.
You need one. Yeah, you need one. Um, yeah, I mean, it's I find that this, being able to play drums, that the skills are that they cross over to a lot of other things. I work as a bartender once a week. I had this
Hmm.
really great job fall into my lap over the course of pandemic, where one of my good friends was opening up a spot, and I wasn't going on tour, and he said, "Hey, would you like to help my friend finish out the build of this bar, and then maybe work as a bartender?" I said, I'd love to. And I hadn't worked in formal, like using counts and speed pours and double jiggering and stuff. And that stuff came so easily to me. It was like literally they showed me how to do it. And then the next day I was, double jiggering and then shaking a cocktail while, stirring another. And so I think that it's easy to see how, skills on the drums correlate to skills in life. I mean, it's just about coordination.
Yeah. When was it that you you were playing with your dad's band? When was the first time you played with either other kids or people that were older than you that were not associated with your dad or your dad's friends that he played with?
I started a band in middle school, and we wrote tunes, and it was 1998 or whatever. So pop punk was on the radio, and we
Mm-hmm.
had all come up listening to alternative rock, and it seemed like every third um, young like young middle schooler was playing an instrument and playing like a rock instrument. And so it was just kind of like a very natural extension. But I think it was maybe sixth, seventh grade. And then we were like very active in the, sort of local New Jersey scene. We would all go to shows together at VFW halls, and we would you know, play at this club in Sayreville called the Club Benet and Chrome and Step In Ballroom, and it was like it was a different time. It was like we would just my friends would come over to my house on Saturdays, and we would spend all day just in the basement playing music.
Do you remember the feeling the first time you stepped on stage to play with your band doing original music? Did you have that we're a gang sense automatically that you get when you go on tour, or were you nervous?
Oh well, I think you're always going to be nervous. Um, it was a funny thing because with that band, I played drums and I also played guitar and sang because my other friend Scott Wozniak, who was in the band, who actually was at the Sunny Day Real Estate show with me, whom you met, he's a great drummer too. And we would just trade off, and we both knew how to play a little bit of guitar. And I was writing music and singing music, and so the things that made me really nervous were kind of when I was acting as the vocalist. But you have a naivete when you're that age that translates to a kind of like dumb confidence that I almost wish I could tap into today. Of course, I look back at those times and think I wish I were a little bit more self-aware. But yeah, of course was nervous. But at the same time, it was also a natural extension of what I had seen people doing constantly, and what I was doing constantly in my home. You imagine you go to the Stone Temple Pilots show, and Eric Kretz all of a sudden falls and has to like they do the classic, does anyone here know how to play all of our songs, and so I mentally, like an athlete, I felt like I had been preparing for that moment for a long time.
Were there bands that you were going to see that you feel like you could have stepped in and filled any position where you were that studied and focused?
Yeah, definitely. And in fact, I had an opportunity maybe 10 years ago to play with the lead singer of my absolute favorite band from when I was in high school. The band was called Penfold. Dude's name is
Mm-hmm.
Brian Carley. And I used to go see Penfold and, cry and like yell and shout lyrics in the old, like, second wave emo days. And, I would practice all of their songs, and I knew every one of their songs, and got an opportunity to play. We did like a few older like Penfold songs later on. This, like I was mentioning, 10 years ago when I got to play a couple times with Brian Carley, and it was it. I think about that, and that was like one of my first kind of like pinch me moment. But he had become a friend at that point, so it was it was not quite as surreal as being able to step on the bandstand with them if I were like 15 years old, or 12 years old or whatever.
Right. I just had a crazy memory, and in 2001 or 2 in New Jersey, in some sort of, I swear I drive by it when I'm doing that drive, the parkway and the turnpike there.
Mm-hmm.
There's like an IKEA, and there used to be like a Funplex.
Yep, exit 13A. It's right across the highway from the Newark Airport.
Now, I swear that is the location where I played a day festival with a bunch of bands once. Does that ring a bell to you? 2002? I feel like
It's possible Warped Tour could have been
it
there.
wasn't war. Yeah, no, we weren't very hip.
North Jersey there. I mean, it's funny the way that those kind of DIY or those like sort of punk scenes worked. That's a very sort of like urban corridor. That sort of like Newark, Elizabeth area. And I didn't go to a ton of shows. It's also possible that I'm just ignorant to that scene. But I was
No.
going to a lot of shows in 2001, 2002. And they were tending to either focus more on the like Asbury Park, Old Bridge sort of just slightly south of there, or more north and west. It's totally possible that there could have been a big festival there, but it doesn't ring a bell. The big festivals that I played and went to in 2001 and 2002 were Skate and Surf Festival, Warp Tour, and those were all like Asbury Park kind of things.
Yeah. Asbury Park also, I just didn't know what to expect. I've only been there a few times, but in the last 8 years, what a place.
Yeah. Yeah.
What
I
a
came
cool
very close
place.
to growing up in Asbury Park. My parents were sort of this close to buying property there in the early 80s when it was very inexpensive. And they, of course, are kicking themselves now because that property values have skyrocketed there. But, I wouldn't be
What are
where
you
I
going to
am
do?
today. So none of us would be, if there's, what if moments. But
Sure.
Asbury is great. My wife and I go there a lot, hang out when we go to visit my parents. We'll go drive to Asbury. And there's great music there. There's a great little venue called The Saint that I played at a bunch of times. And then there's a new venue called the House of Independence. And the Stone Pony, of course.
Yeah. So when you didn't go far away when you went to college, did you live at home and go to college, or did you live?
No, I lived for a couple years. I lived, just like on campus housing, and
Mhm.
had a little room, like a little practice space at Rutgers. And then I moved into kind of like a punk rock house where there was 7 of us living there, and we would do rehearsals and throw parties and sometimes show in the basement. And then I was also very closely associated with a lot of the other houses that would regularly serve as venues. New Brunswick it has this really vibrant community, and part of the reason why there have been so many incredible hardcore and punk bands from there is because there's this great student population that can't get into bars that
Right.
are 21 plus, and so the houses kind of band together and decide to make themselves the venue spaces, and they put up touring bands, and you make a big pot of vegan chili, and the band sleeps in your living room or whatever. And I was very much a part of that community and that aesthetic, and it really sort of set the stage for like the kind of like brotherhood of touring community, and looking after one another. And then also just like the sort of like hip economy, to use like a Deadhead reference, like this idea of trading shows for like a band from Atlanta, and then we would come play their house or whatever when we would go to Atlanta and go on tour. And it was it really kind of felt like a community and this like network. And yeah, that was like it's funny because I studied jazz music in college, yet the thing that prepared me most for my career in music was my participation in this really thriving and vibrant DIY scene, and the getting in the
Right.
van, over the weekends. I met so many amazingly talented musicians at Rutgers who were formally studying, but when they weren't getting hired to play musicals, they didn't really know where to put that expression. And I was playing shows every weekend. Of course, I wasn't making any money doing it, but like you were getting to meet different people and sort of operate in this exchange of ideas. And, it was, I'm just so incredibly grateful for the people that I met who allowed me to take part in that scene and that community.
I mean, that age when you are really going for it, you aren't at home for the first time. It's a really magical time. Um, and the first bit of time when you sort of like, I'm mature, and you step away from that, the community starts to dissolve a little bit, or it just morphs into there's new people in it and you're gone. It's a little sad. The saddest part about all of it to me is a thing that you touched on, um, that is just sort of inherent in music, and that is that you play a gig every weekend, but you don't make any money. So during
Mm-hmm.
that time, you're almost, um, you're almost conditioned to like, well, that's cute. Thanks for stopping by and playing your music. Uh, Here's your exposure. Here's your 5 exposures. Go pay your rent with it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
how do you combat that? A lot of people talk about the 3 elements of a gig, right? You've got to have, there's either the money, the music, or the hang.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're young, there's no money, but the other 2 are typically there. How do you get your head out of that? How do you keep yourself valuable in your own mind, I guess?
It's
How is that lesson learned?
Yeah, it is. Conditioning is exactly the right term for it. That's exactly what was going through my head as you were asking the question. Like, and I guess it was a valuable um, experience in a way that sort of like like prepared me for not making income, royalty income, in streaming services. Now that people can't really like you're not really making money from recordings. But that's what a large reason why I turned to teaching. I really enjoyed it. and your time is really well compensated. It's of course more difficult for you to work longer hours. If I work a bartending shift, work an 11-hour shift, I am absolutely wiped when I teach 7 lessons. It's like, because you're giving
You teach
so much of
7
yourself.
lessons in a day?
Yeah. I mean, there's most weeks
30-minute lessons.
No, hour-long lessons.
Ooh,
Yeah. Um, but
that's a grind.
it's definitely a grind, but I love it, and it keeps me motivated, and it keeps me sharp. It keeps me a sharp communicator, and it's constantly making me be in touch with processes, and it makes me think about, well, what did I know when I was at this stage of playing development? And that's something that, once you've been playing for such a long time, that you lose sight of. And, to get back to your question about how it allows me to remain valuable, and not to make this like a humble brag kind of thing, but it reminds me of like how much I've acquired in terms of like what I now know about this instrument and about music. And so, teaching and education, you're like well compensated enough, for your time. Um, and a lot of my playing income comes from being away from home. And to some
Right.
degree, like, it's easier to ask people for money when you go on tour, when you can't wake up in your own bed and, make the kind of coffee that you like to make. And, there seems to be more of a, like a capital exchange, like it's easier to ask someone for money in those situations. But there is no doubt about it that music is not a terribly well compensated profession. And you do have to have many irons and many fires, and just be willing to hustle to do it. And I also think that there's absolutely no shame in not making your income in playing music. I think that that's one of the things that I wish I had time to like address and talk about every time I meet one of my dad's friends or whatever, who will say like, "You're living the dream." And they mean this as such a great compliment and such a great supportive statement. And I'm not like trying to pick their words apart at all. But
Sure.
what I would point to is 2 of my best friends are some of the best musicians that I know. These dudes, Jeff Widner and Justin Gaynor, and they don't make their income through playing music. And they are just absolutely tremendous musicians who are capable of pretty much taking any gig that comes their way. And, they decide to live in New York City, where things are expensive, but things are also inspiring. And, they'll go to experimental music shows and, be able to see wonderful music. And they've made the decision that they want to be in control of the music that they interface with, and the type of music that they play, and that they're going to choose to make their income elsewhere so that they don't have to spend time doing things that they don't want to do in this field. And I think that, you can definitely talk about having to take gigs that you probably don't want to take. Like you said, the 3 elements of a gig,
So far, I love every gig I've done. Um, I don't love every job.
Yeah, of course.
Mm, I think in my very first podcast, I had Matt Sweeney, and he said something that stuck with me, and I'll probably botch it, but he said something to the effect of, being great at music and having a music career, the connection between those things is tenuous at best. At best.
Yeah. It's it's a thing. It's like a little bit of it's like, it seems elusive. And of course, I feel very accomplished that I do make 90% of my income. I could stop bartending now and be okay, but the bartending thing does allow me to be a little bit more comfortable, maybe buy pieces of recording gear that I wouldn't be able to afford otherwise. But that's not where I find, like, the where I make my income from is not where I find value. And one of the things that I ask my students about is, well, especially my students who have been playing for a long time and are playing gigs, what's your goal? Like, what's your goal in this whole thing? And if they ever decide to ask me, the thing that I answer with and the thing that I really truly believe is respect from my peers. That's the definition of success for me, is that musicians whom I admire also thinking that my playing is worth being put out into the world. And you can't pay your rent with that, but you can certainly persuade yourself to keep at the game of playing music with that.
Well, that is something that supports something that pays your rent, though, and that is that if the people that you are paying attention to and the people that your peers, if they are in a community of or a pool of musicians who are working and earning money, then they're going to recommend you if they respect you.
Totally. And that's how I basically get all of the gigs that I play.
When you left Rutgers and you left the punk rock house, what was the first? Did you go straight to New York after that?
I lived with my folks for a little while. I
Mm-hmm.
was a substitute teacher at high school and middle schools, and I worked as like a local kind of community drum teacher.
What were you
Um,
teaching
oh,
as a
just whatever
substitute?
teachers didn't show up, And then they would often put me in the music department when I could, because then I could still run rehearsal. I had a little bit of conducting experience from Rutgers, and could just do sectionals like with like the concert band if the teacher was out or whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, it was cool. It was really cool. Or, we would turn it, the teacher would allow me to do like a Q&A if kids had any questions about going to school for music, or like, what it's like going on tour. Because I was also on tour with my band Communipaw, that I, still play with. I do that band with my best friend Brian Bond and my other best friend Justin Gaynor. And we still put out records. It's like my ongoing passion project. And, I just toured around, and I did that for 2 years. And then I moved to New York in 2010.
What was the first gig that you got as a professional touring drummer, playing like where you had to learn someone's music and go out and be the conduit for it?
Um, well, I was doing that a lot in New York. And I played with just a lot of fly by night kind of like ensembles, and I was, playing with everything. I was playing with my dad's band as a fill-in drummer, and we were doing 30 tunes. I was playing in like whatever bands needed a drummer for a CMJ showcase, and there would be a couple shows here. I was also playing with a band called Mama Holler that was on tour a whole bunch, and it was kind of like a soul thing. But I was just doing a lot of New York gigs, and then playing with my own project, and just kind of playing around the city. And then I was I befriended this really great musician named Max Hart, who at the time was playing in Katy Perry's band. He was playing keyboards, and he now plays with Melissa Etheridge and just does all these like really great gigs. And he's a fantastic pedal steel guitarist and a great organist. And he and I were playing country swing music together and just doing country gigs and like whatever kind of work came in. And this dude, Max Hart, used to play in We Are Scientists when they had a keyboard player. And something happened with Scientists, like drummer, and they made it kind of known to Max that they were just kind of looking out for somebody new. And he said, I've been playing gigs with this dude, Keith. You guys are going to love him. He really loves cinema. He loves Jack Reacher. Actually, they told the Scientist guys are the ones who hipped me to Jack Reacher. But Max could tell that I had the capacity to appreciate a great American author like Lee Child,
Being
And
a cinemaphile journalist.
exactly. And so really like the first time that I ever had like a pressure gig situation of like learning a full discography kind of was We Are Scientists. Everything else seemed a bit more like low stakes, kind of like New York stuff. And I was totally like learning people's tunes, but the Scientists was the sort of like first major job that I had.
Yeah. Okay, Rosie. In the cover circuit that you were doing with your dad and stuff, what were those classic rock songs?
Yeah, classic rocks. The Doors, Springsteen, like Rolling Stones, and then like also some like kind of cooler, like weirdly like rockabilly stuff, like Robert Gordon stuff, and just like you know, uh, classic rock stuff.
Yeah. Did you do enough? There's so much muscle memory, and just when you get inside of a song and you just know it unconsciously, right? Where you can just play it. You're not thinking like, here comes that bar. What does this fill?
Yeah.
Do
I
you
mean,
think
it depends.
you could step back into that and do one of those gigs today?
Oh yeah, because I have like a folder that's just ever expanding of like lead sheets of like grooves, rough tempos. I teach this a lot. I teach this a lot to people as a way of learning music, where you write everything that is going to give you all the information that you need to play a song looking at one piece of paper. And it makes total sense, to have that kind of a thing. Horn players have it, guitarists have it, so like why shouldn't drummers? And I'd probably have to like, go through it once or twice in my studio. But yeah, I think I could do that type of gig. In fact, I'm like kind of trying to get my dad to get his band like kind of like back together so that I can sit in with them.
Awesome.
And like do these gigs because it's just really fun to get together and hang out with them and keeps you fresh in a different way, but
And
yeah,
playing. I mean, playing.
playing.
Just
Yeah.
an opportunity to play instead of not play is a good opportunity.
Big time. And now I'm old enough to smoke a joint with the other guitarist in the parking lot between sets on set break or whatever, so.
The first time I ever saw a drummer put down song notes, I was kind of mesmerized. And I don't think I saw anyone do that in Seattle. I think the first person I saw do that was Oscar Hogdahl. Do you know Oscar?
I'm not hip to Oscar. No.
He's a New York guy. He's Finnish, but he plays with a bunch of folks. But he plays with that the Queen Ultimate Queen cover band. He's a
Oh,
great
yeah,
drummer.
okay.
He did some gigs with the band that I was doing when I first got here, and he just had these notes, and I was like, can I see that? And it looked like glyphs. I was like, what is this? There's like some numbers, there's some symbols. And he tried to explain it to me, and I was like, forget it. Forget I asked. Will you explain to me and people listening what that might have been?
Yeah, well, I can, for those who are like watching, I can put up some of my notes. This is for a We Are Scientists song that I had to learn from the recording because we recorded the record 2 years ago and I didn't remember what I played for it. So you'll see, like, basically what I try to do is summary, right? So if there's a verse, this is the groove that's playing in the verse. And then maybe you'll try to write down a couple, like if there's a little variation or whatever. And then for the chorus, here's a groove for the chorus, right? And I'm basically just figuring out like, okay, the verse 8 times, 8 times, chorus 8 times or whatever. And then, like I have like little notes about what fills are in the tune. And then, for things like where the bridge comes, I just draw a little bridge, and you got to try to make them visually engaging. I learned this from a psychology class that I took at Rutgers, where a teacher made us take our notes using these things called mind maps. and you're supposed to use color and like make it a little bit less linear than this, but for something that is linear, that has to be done in sequence and time, I find that this is a little bit better. But I took a lot of those techniques from mind mapping, and it also sounds to me like Oscar Hogdahl was using similar things. I mean, all different
Yeah.
drummers have all different kinds of notation. Billy Martin, the drummer from Medeski, Martin and Wood, has this great drum book, where he uses symbols, like as in with an S, not like a C,
Yeah.
to denote certain hits. And it basically sort of cuts through this this pedagogical barrier where like you have to know how to read music in order to groove. And his point in this book is basically like, there are so many amazing drummers in remote areas of the world who have a sense of rhythm and can dance, right? But they don't know how to read music. And yet that doesn't prevent them from passing this this on to either pupils or other drummers. And so I think that every drummer develops a sense of how to do this. I developed my methodology because in college, my teacher, this amazing jazz legend, Victor Lewis, amazing teacher, great guy. I feel so lucky to call him a friend and a mentor. I would come into my lesson and we wouldn't work on like rudiments and techniques and stuff. He would have his Discman, and his like a pair of headphones, and he'd say, "You just showed up to the gig, and the band leader wants to do a new song, and here's the demo. You have 10 minutes. Make yourself whatever you need in order to be able to play that tune." And that's what I think. I do that exercise with some of my, more advanced students now. And, even the less advanced students, like people who are just sort of beginning their journey with the drums, who want to read things out. I tell them, hey, if you go like learn music with a band, they're not going to have a stack of music to hand you. They're going to say, listen to these recordings, and it's really helpful to have a means of taking notes.
What a
And I
great
just think,
exercise he handed you, because often in instruction, there's so much focus, for good reason, put on technique.
Mhm.
And it's like, you can take all the technique in the world and still go fuck up a gig.
Totally, yeah. I mean,
But
I also at that point it was sort of assumed that you had enough technique together, and of course, if I had a question about some kind of technique,
sure.
he was all ears about it. But yeah, it was lessons in music, and it was lessons on how to be a musician and how to be a self-motivating musician. Not necessarily lessons in drums. And even the people who come here and tell me that they want to learn how to play drums, I think I'd be doing them a great, disservice if I didn't make them more broad lessons about how to translate listening to something into taking an active part in playing it.
It seems to me that drummers and former drummers, like drummers who step into other positions, like drummers tend to be the most diversified musician in a band typically. And even some front people are former drummers. I feel like drummers just have made a habit of, you're back there, you're listening to everything, you're in the writing process, almost writing transitions.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that musicians, I also think that musicians make the best producers. Oh,
I'm sorry, I missed
you've
that
actually.
last part of the question.
Oh, I said that I think that musicians actually make the best engineers and producers as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, especially these days where you have to engineer and produce your own stuff. I mean, after we get off the line, I'm going to be self-engineering, a recording session that I'm doing
Right.
for, for some tunes that I owe some people. But regarding like the larger question, I mean, there's an element of sort of soft power to being in the background. And I liken the role of a drummer as being more of a conductor. Of course, singers perform this role too. Like if you see some singer who's got an acoustic guitar and they're sort of like waving like they're cutting the band off and stuff like that, like they're performing that role. It's probably a music director who's actually prepared the band to be able to know that kind of stuff. But I
It's
I
a good
also
bit
think
though,
that
isn't it?
oh, it's great. It's great. I can totally see, the wizard behind the curtain, but hey, I love it. But why? Yeah, I don't know. Like insofar as, Dave Grohl became this amazing frontman, or Josh Tillman, like Father John Misty, who used to play drums for Fleet Foxes. I mean,
Yeah.
let's say the obvious. These people have amazing voices and they're very talented singers, right? So first and foremost, and this is the hard part, they found their voice, which is something that so few singers are really able to do, and that's different than having a good voice, finding your voice. I think that it comes because with drums, like, you really have to understand your role in a song, at least like working drummers do. And that magic balance between being visible but not overplaying, is such an essential thing, and it's what sort of tends to propel a lot of music. I mean, if you listen to drummers like Steve Gadd or James Gadson, these like super groovin drummers who also know how to do things that are incredibly gymnastic.
Yeah.
Like it's the thing that really sort of like propels a piece of music, and I think that you just get used to thinking about a song that way, and it enables you to think like, oh shit, I can write that, or I can find a voice or a vision. Also, like putting something to time. There's an element of making it real, where I love to sit in my studio and drone on ambient chords. I love it, right? Who doesn't love to sort of bliss out onto that type of stuff? But then trying to actually shape it, if I'm going to put a groove on it, really brings it into a different realm. And that's the thing that allows you to understand how to take an idea and make it something kind of like real.
What about music that you compose and write? Where do you find your inspiration for that?
Oh man, so many different places. I work a lot with a band, Communipaw, that allows me to do a lot of this production stuff and to act, as a partial producer along with my friend Brian Bond. And Brian inspires me with, he'll send me some chord changes and I'll, put some production touches on it or this or that, or like allow him to, like hearing one of Brian's songs allows me to hear where a song like can go. So I'll encourage him to like speed tempos up or to slow things down or whatever it may be. So he's a constant source of inspiration. And then just New York City, seeing so many amazing musicians play. Like tonight, I'm thinking about going to shows, and there's a fantastic guitarist named Che Chen who plays in a band called $75 Bill, playing with Chris Corsano, this legendary experimental avant-garde drummer. And just seeing what they can get away with in front of a crowd of paying people is something that is constantly pushing me to make my ideas like weirder and like to kind of put out solo music. And then, film scores are a huge source of inspiration for me, listening to fantastic composers like Johan Johansson. I just watched this film Arrival recently, which I'd seen before, and the score for that film is just so achingly beautiful. And, Johnny Greenwood, who isn't inspired by what Johnny Greenwood does,
Yeah. What do you have planned for this year? I mean, we all
So,
like the last year has been okay.
yeah.
People have been able to work the last year. It's like it's like we've been held underwater and we just came up. The waterboarding is over,
Yeah.
hopefully. But people are getting back to work. It's it's a lot harder now. Everything is more expensive. Margins are tough, but
Yeah.
everyone, we sally forth. What are your plans this year?
So in 5 days, or 6 days, sorry, I'll be leaving for a tour of Europe with We Are Scientists. We're going to
Rad.
Germany and Austria and France and like a bunch of really, really, really awesome places. And we actually just decided to use a smaller van, which we're not sure that we're going to fit all of our equipment in, but because we want to take advantage of being in the EU again, and we want to be able to stay in city centers and park in covered garages where the typical splitter or sprinter vans that we're using over there will not.
Right.
So, EU tour of with We Are Scientists, which was rescheduled from March last year, when Omicron came out, Germany kind of like locked down and stuff again. And then promoters were just saying like, oh, shows are not really happening. It's not a great idea for you guys to come. So we're finally getting back to those European territories. A bunch of summer festivals with We Are Scientists, which will be great. My band Communipaw is going to release a full length that we're just putting finishing touches on now. And I've actually set an ambitious creative goal for myself to release my first EP as composer, performer, producer, like everything. Just basically
amazing.
putting my own music out. And I've got 2 songs finished in the can, but it's really hard because of the piecemeal and hustle nature of a lot of what musicians have to do in a metropolitan environment.
Having the energy
really
to focus onto a creative thing after just walking to the studio in New York is
it's really hard,
can
and
be trying.
I give myself Fridays and Saturdays to work on my own music. That is after, I'll pepper in some lessons while, teaching. But just the nature too of like, I was just in the UK for 3 weeks and I came back and I've been, back in the States for about a week and a half now. And, it's just like revolving door, turn right back around. I want to say I'm extremely privileged and fortunate to be able to have this kind of work. And I do not take it for granted and take it lightly. I feel very, very, very blessed because of those opportunities. But I do wonder sometimes if you're making the smartest decision, if you care about putting an aesthetic vision out, like if by taking work as a drummer, if that's detrimental to this voice that you're starting to put out in the world. But my main gig with We Are Scientists is not so involving and so invasive that, we're at this point, we're only really touring for 75 days a year, maybe 80 days
Right.
a year, which is about half of what we used to do. Like a varied and ambitious, year, just kind of trying to, make things that are engaging and aesthetically beautiful and fun to play,
Tell me about these 2 songs that are finished. Tell me as much as you feel comfortable sharing. And do you have those are the 2 songs you have completed, but do you have other songs partially completed?
Oh God, who doesn't? It's the
Sure.
novel
That's all
every
I
writer
have.
has in their beds, right? You dig? I mean, think about if somebody were to scroll through your voice notes app right now, how many partial ideas
God.
they'd see.
I cringed to think.
I found a really great creative motivator in listening to interviews with electronic musicians, specifically Fred Gibson, who writes music as Fred again. And he was talking in this great interview on Tape Notes, which I encourage everyone to go out and listen to after they listen to Couch Riffs.
Tape Notes.
Yeah, yeah, it's this great nerdy English podcast where it's kind of what I always want Song Exploder to be. No hate on Song Exploder, it's a great podcast, but Tape Notes
Sure.
gets a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of like technical aspects, what pieces of
Hmm.
gear they were using, and then they listen to demos,
It's less
before like
pedestrian.
checking out masters. I'm sorry?
It's less pedestrian. My sister wouldn't be into Tape Notes, but she would be into Song Exploder.
Totally, totally. Um, and Fred again was talking about how the ultimate thing that when you're composing an idea is, or when you're composing something or writing something, is to just honor the idea. And the big issue that I always found that I was getting hung up in the capturing process, right? So setting up microphones, to get a vocal demo down. I don't do that anymore. I use my iPhone, and
Yeah.
I have to tell you, and this is all credit to Fred Gibson because he's the one that hit me to this. The iPhone mic sounds fucking amazing.
Yeah.
And it gets all of this sparkle from the room that gives your vocal take so much character and quality. And it kind of like doesn't make you feel this bated breath, like, okay, here it goes. I'm going to sing a vocal take now. And it doesn't have that like dryness to it. And I've just found that by honoring the idea and trying to capture as much as I can, sure, like maybe I'll wind up re-recording an element of a vocal take, or maybe I'll, wind up needing to get something with a little bit more clarity. But I mean, think about it. Music speaks to people not because of production aesthetics. Music often speaks to people because of the idea.
Technology has allowed us to do so many amazing things, but I feel like it has stunted my ability to complete many ideas because I'll be down the rabbit hole of a plugin, like, oh, look at this part is great, and then you're like, oh, how many fucking hundreds of ways can it sound? Who cares?
Amen.
Finish
Amen.
the
Yeah.
idea. It's yeah. I think that the phone is incredible. And when people ask me, hey, I need to get a recording set up. What should I get? I say, get GarageBand
Yeah.
on your
Yeah.
phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Totally. It's great.
because who cares? You know,
Yeah.
Guided by Voices isn't, they have some albums that are obviously sonically like incredible, but it's not about the sonics. It's about
No,
the performance.
it's about the idea and the performance. And then often a lot of those things, like I love Bon Iver, right? And
Sure.
listening to Bon Iver's music, and those like background scratchy elements are often like the things that give life and like make it seem like it was created, make his music. And you can apply this to anybody who has like slightly imperfect sounding recordings. It doesn't make it sound like it was recorded in a vacuum. And that's
Right.
happened to me a couple times too, where I was in my apartment and in my obviously non-sound treated office, in my Brooklyn apartment. And there was some bleed I got from, because there's a school around the corner and some kids were shouting outside, and like that bled into the vocal take, and I loved it. I chopped it up and turned the volume up, and then I made like a sampler based on their or a synthesizer based on that sample sound, and it's in the
Wow.
recording, and it's like some of my favorite stuff comes from that step.
Will you talk about, because you mentioned Brooklyn apartment, you're a creative, you're a professional musician. We talk about the teeter-totter of the inspiration of being in such a dense and inspiring place, and the tremendous challenges, especially as a drummer. Although most clubs have a drum set that you can just,
Yeah, I mean,
sometimes you don't even have to bring cymbals, like bring
yeah.
a snare and a kick
I
drum
always like to
pedal.
bring cymbals. Even more so than a snare. But man, You're totally right, and it always feels like this precarious balance. I mean, I'm coming to you here from my music studio, which I'm extremely fortunate to have, and it's a pretty large room. This is um, and it's in Midtown Manhattan, and it's a
Wow.
very expensive room, but it's the only place where I am able to play drums. And specifically being a drummer, the only kind of music that I can do at home is essentially like technology music, let's call it electronic music, or I can mix tracks that I need to get out to clients or whatever. And you have to develop a very specific process for that. That is probably like, you know, that is probably this is very specific to being a New York City musician. For example, if I had my own space in a garage or something like that in suburbs, I'd probably work on a track, get the ideas together, mix it, and get it off to the client, and then work on the next track. What I have to do here, though, is I have to do all of the drum recording in 1 or 2 days that I'm going to do, and then take it home and then mix it, and then like get it out to the client or whatever. And you're always trying to remember, like, so you have to take really good notes about it. That's all stuff like once you get into the finding a space to do it. It feels. I talk with my wife all the time where there'll be an offending incident once a month where I'll just say like, God, I think I'm just going to be ready for some comfort and some convenience soon.
Sure.
I'm 36 years old now, and I just it really feels like by the time I'm in my 40s, I'm going to need some convenience. One of the hardest things about having a studio in Midtown is that you can't park your car around here. So if I need to grip drums to go play a gig or whatever, I come here to my studio on the subway, take the subway home to the subway home, pick up my car, drive back to Midtown, pray
Which
that I
takes
don't
longer
get it.
than the train.
Dude, yes, much longer than the train. And I'm only allowed to come back after 7 p.m., where I can park my car, for like $10 on the street or whatever. And then, hoof my drums up and down this, like, the hallway and into the freight elevator and blah, 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 blah. And it is a back-breaking existence, working as a drummer and finding spaces where you can rehearse and record. Because that's the other thing is like I only keep.
Maybe you get that U2 gig.
Yeah, right.
That'd be pretty sweet.
Larry Mullen Jr., I'm sure, is a very physically fit person, and it has nothing to do with humping his drums around.
Sure, but he's not doing the shows this year.
He's not?
No. I'm
Whoa.
almost positive he's not on these Vegas shows.
Wow. Well, Mr. Bono, if you are listening right now,
He's a big supporter of Couch Riffs. Yeah, he's my biggest Patreon supporter.
I love the idea that that's true, but Mr. Bono, you've got, two motivated individuals over here, that would be happy to support your creative endeavors. And I'd love to play with you. And, I'm sure
I'll play second base.
You dig?
I've done it before.
Oh man, that's some broken social scene stuff right there.
For sure.
No, but it is one of the things, where when you hear people say that really cynical thing of, I tell my students that only be a musician if you can't imagine, having any happiness in life not being a musician. And there is some truth to that it is such a hustle and it is such a grind that you have to find the pleasure in the thing itself, right? But that's also a deflating message that, frankly, like, I probably heard when I was younger, but didn't let it deter me. I mean,
I'm not into reverse psychology or any of that shit.
Yeah.
I just want to be a little more direct.
Yeah. Yeah, but it is definitely a grinding existence, and it's one of the things that I'm I'm really grateful to have I've had this studio space for 13 years, and the
Wow.
circumstance under which I found it was one of these like classic New York stories that if you talk to enough musicians here, the moral ultimately is if you've been here long enough, you're going to find somebody who has some kind of a need for you to slot into the studio, and then that opens up the opportunity. And it's like, or become friends with your Polish landlady or whatever, and she like forgets like what market rate is on an apartment, so it's the reason why you're still paying $2,000 a month for your 1 bedroom or whatever.
Right. Which is, yeah, don't even get me started. I'm glad to be up here. It's pretty great up here, and we got
Yeah,
a house at the right time
yeah,
before the pandemic stuff hit, and it went wild. So
that is
um
something I'm super envious of. My wife is from upstate, and she's done, as she puts it, way too many half years of grayness in order to entertain the idea of moving upstate again. So that's the funny thing, is we like a little bit feel trapped of in a prison of our own making, because we don't really want to move to New Jersey. As much as we love New Jersey, we don't want to not take part in a creative community. And we all have family here in sort of New York metropolitan area or the upstate area. And so we don't really want to move to like Los Angeles or Nashville, though I do love those cities and could imagine living there. It's hard, for people who don't have rich parents. And also, I don't mean that as a slight, but there's an element of where the future is unsure, but that's also exciting in a way.
I think so. I'm, if only the successes that you've expressed were on paper and none of the details of your story, it would be it would be very impressive. But no, like getting to know you, it doesn't surprise me that these things have happened for you, because you're focused and driven and talented. That helps. And a great hang and pizza. Um, you
Pizza.
know, I think you two would be fools to not give you a ring a ling.
Oh my
That's what I'm
God.
that's what I'm getting at.
Well, Mike, thanks very much. How about this? If I get the U2 gig, you come
I
out
can
with
be your
me,
drum tech.
and you can be the tech. Yeah, which is also about the hang.
Yeah. Well, it would have to be, because I one of the things that really sucked for me when I owned drum sets is I couldn't I just have no ability to tune a drum.
Man, even when I'm lucky enough to have a drum tech on a gig, I'm never asking them to tune the drums. I mean, of course, it's helpful, but I also like coming from that DIY like punk thing. I feel so weird and like icky about somebody setting up, like being tasked with the idea of like setting up my own kid or my kid or whatever, and always want to try to help out with that stuff. So I think what I'm trying to say is you're perfectly positioned to come as my drum tech for you two.
Perfect. You know what? I did a gig with Clem Burke last year, and
Oh, hell yeah.
he fucking loaded in and he's, I don't know, 70. He loaded
Yeah.
in his drums, set them up. We practiced 2 days for like 6 hours. He was like, didn't want to take a break. He was a machine. It was inspiring.
That's
Um,
awesome to hear.
yeah,
He's a great drummer.
inspiring.
I mean, Roy Haynes, one of the all-time greats, just turned 90 freaking 8. He's 98 years old.
Do you know who I talked to on the phone? Maybe it was last year. Was Bernard Purdy, because I was
Oh
I was gonna
man.
fucking try to get him in a Couch Riffs episode doing a cover, but the
Good
concept,
luck.
I I was like, Mr. Purdy, I will send a car for you and rent a studio and pay you a day rate, and he was like, yeah, sure, let's go.
Yeah.
But there was some conceptual stuff. It wasn't a money thing. It was just like conceptual. He was just like, so I'm just going to play some drums and you're going to write a song around it. And it was like, well, no, not exactly.
What song were
Anyway,
you trying to get him to do?
I didn't get that far in my mind. I was so deeply into it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Hey,
Man, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm about to die.
Okay. Oh
Can
no.
we I've got a oh no, 911. Um I I I feel like I could talk to you for 4 hours, but I need to kill this and then but don't go away because we've got to let this thing
We're
um
uploading.
yeah. Um I've had an incredible time hanging and talking with you, and I think the world of you.
Likewise, man, and I want to just thank you for facilitating such a great space for people to come and talk about things that they give a shit about, and for being such a great listener, and and I think the world of what you're doing here in giving
Uh,
musicians who are like really making the music scene sort of like move by being the sort of like unsung players, like giving them a platform to talk. And so I just feel so grateful for your the space and for your friendship, and I'm psyched to eat some pizza with you, man, and hang out.
you're great.